Hello there, and a very warm welcome to today's special guest webinar, which is all about facilitation in the virtual world. And this is clearly a topic that has struck a chord. We have a great deal of people set to attend us today. We can see from the attendee numbers that are joining. We've got people joining us, as we can see from the chat boxes, from all over the UK, across Europe, even further afield into Africa, Middle East, Hong Kong. So a huge welcome to wherever you're joining us from, and we truly hope that you get some value and some ideas and insights from today's session. So my name's Mark. I'm the Managing Director here at TMSDI, and here we look after supporting organisations, teams and leaders in having powerful, impactful conversations through the use of the full systems approach that's offered by all the psychometrics in the TMSDI suite. And my background's actually in psychology, and alongside this role, I work as an executive coach and team facilitator, and I'm very, very privileged to be able to collaborate with some amazing teams and leaders across the globe. And as for our guest presenter, we can see Joe here in the video panel as well. This is Joe Cook from Lightbulb Moment. Joe has over 20 years of experience in learning and development roles in a whole variety of sectors and organisations, and is widely recognised in the learning and development arena as an influential voice when it comes to virtual classrooms, webinars, and developing all kinds of learning solutions for businesses. So quite simply, if I was looking for a guru to help me out and think about learning, virtual classrooms, virtual facilitation, Joe would always be the first person I'd want to talk to. So over to you, Joe.
Well, thank you very much. Gosh, I'm not sure I can live up to that now, but over the next hour, I will certainly try to. So welcome, everybody. Thank you. And thank you for your comments and questions in the chat already. Please do make sure you're set to everyone, because if I don't see it, and there's a lot of you, then we'll miss your comment or your question. Now, today we are here to talk about 5 key changes in the virtual world that have happened over the last year, 18 months, and what they mean for you. Now, as Mark said, I've been working in learning and development for more years than I care to remember. And since 2013, I've been running Lightbulb Moment, where we have focused exclusively on live online learning, virtual classrooms, webinars, design delivery, and we help teams of people to do this really well. And I wouldn't be anywhere if I didn't have my sidekick, my business partner, and quite frankly, also my brother, which is why we have the same last name, Mike. You won't hear from him today, but he will be in the chat. He's been posting things in there already. He'll be sharing links and answering questions and stuff like that. So he is a very handy person to have around. So over the next hour, we are going to discuss looking back at the last 18 months of our virtual learning journey. We're going to have a look at those 5 key changes in virtual facilitation we've seen in that time. And then we're going to talk about what you can do about those changes and upskilling over the next year. Now, we've got that chat window, plenty of questions for you, and hopefully plenty of questions from you as well. So let's get hearing from each other. And by anyone's measure, 2020 was quite the year in any which way that you want to look at it. So let's start by looking back about a year or year and a half to your virtual instructor-led training experiences, and we are going to dive straight in with the annotation tools. So what I'd like you to do, please, is if you're on a computer, you can wiggle your mouse on the screen and you'll see what I've got in this screen grab here, which is a toolbar that will jump up on the left, and it will have a squiggly line. If you click on that squiggly line, you'll then be able to see the annotation toolbar. Now, if you're on an iPad or something, it will be quite different, but you can go and find it. You can always use the chat window if you prefer. And you've got it. Let's go and practice with that arrow tool. Now, whilst you're doing that, I've noticed some of you are still sending me text as private messages, which is very lovely of you, but I'm not going to be able to get to read that with so many people here. So please make sure you've set your chat to everyone, and then everybody will be able to see it, including Mark and Mike, who are helping me out on the webinar today. So let's go and practice those arrow tools. And if you can't find it, don't worry, you can always use the chat window. Now this is looking fantastic. Let's just pause on that because I'm going to clear all of these. And what I would like to do is clear all of this annotation and move on to our question. So my question is, if you think before the pandemic, so if you think about 2019, how much virtual training were you delivering? Let's use your arrow tool or any kind of squiggle, any kind of mark that you can make, or you can use the chat window. It's not a problem if you can't use the annotation tools. So if you've got the chat tool, you can use that too. So we're looking very much at the none to some end. Some of you in the lots. Mark, obviously you're in the lots. And in the chat window, we've got some people saying none, some people saying some. So what we've got actually very skewed to the left. So you're all here, hopefully, to pick up a few ideas to develop your skills. So some of us did a bit more, but a lot of us were doing less. That's absolutely brilliant. And it shows just how much things have changed over the time that we've been kind of, have this pandemic. So let's just pause here for a moment. Let me clear all those annotations. Let me clear all those pointers. So let's just pause on the annotation. We're going to come back to it. I promise we'll come back to it. Now, what we were thinking about is when we step forward from, December 2019 or January 2020, even just a few months into early 2020, as the lockdowns were starting, more and more of us went live online. This is from the e-learning guild survey in March of 2020. And they found that 86% of their respondents had at least one or more events moving into an online format. Fairly obviously, because we didn't have much choice, we couldn't do anything else. Breeder, you say, is this a UK stat only? This is from the e-learning guild, who are an American organisation. So I can't remember, if I'm honest with you. I'd imagine it's an American skew, it's American strong, but I think that was open worldwide. So I would look at it that way, global, but probably a bit more American. So let's use our arrow tools again, please, on the slide, and think about now, this month, where are you at? Let's have a look. Are you still at none, or are you moving? Now we can see very obviously, very quickly, we've moved into the lots and nearly everything. Some of us are still at none, and that's of course absolutely normal, because not everything works as virtual facilitation. Not every organisation was ready. Not every organisation had the right timing and all of that kind of stuff. So it's really important that, we're not saying you should do this. It's about what's right for the organisation. And I'm seeing lots of names here that I recognise. Hello to you all, and lots of new names as well. And Michael, thank you for sharing that in the information in the chat. Okay, so we've got lots of people now doing lots of virtual training, and that skew is quite obvious to the right hand side, and I think that's really indicative of how things have changed over the last year or so. So we're going to pause on our annotation right now. We will come back to it, I promise. And we've all seen the stats about how many millions of people were using Zoom and Teams and Adobe Connect and so on. And this is a prediction of nearly 10% annual compound growth. That means 10% each year. It gets bigger and bigger each year, of the virtual classroom market over the next 5 years. Now, this prediction is from November 2020. It's not a pre-COVID stat where suddenly, pre-COVID, you're thinking, right, well, all stats have been thrown out the water now. But this makes it all the more pressing that we go and focus on this as we go forward on virtual classrooms and live online learning. So to these key changes that are shaping the world of live online learning, here are 5 things that I'm seeing specific to live online learning, especially over the last year or 18 months. Now, during 2020, most of us didn't have much of a choice about whether to use digital options at all. And I noticed that Roy said in chat that we used a blended approach via classroom, e-learning, virtual, Microsoft Teams. So actually, it's not just virtual classrooms, although that's our focus today. It was all sorts of digital stuff. We've been on webinars actually where people were saying to us that live online sessions actually saved their business. So we know it's really, really important. A second thing that we have noticed is a lot of people, facilitators and attendees alike, got much more experienced in technology, even if they didn't want to, which quite frankly, a lot of people didn't, they did. So many people got more comfortable attending live online learning or dealing with digital communications. We also had a lot of exposure to live online learning in 2020, and that meant our skills in how to deal with people who were remote to us and still offer good learning rapidly increased, and that's where a lot of you were. And also our use of webcams have increased. Most people were a lot more comfortable being on webcam for meetings and trainings by the end of 2020, even if we were a bit zoomed out by then. And we got much better at working out how to do our face-to-face learning experiences in a virtual way. All of this is great, as things in the virtual world have really advanced very quickly. But there's always a flip side. And it's this that I want to explore more with you, including what we can actually do about it. So let's dig in. So that first point, when about facilitators were forced to accept digital interventions, when the pandemic hit, it was either go digital or go on furlough for so many people. There was often very little choice about whether to embrace the new ways of working that were different to the physical classroom. But as you can see by the flip side comment here is, well, is that going to stick? Is that going to be the way forward? Now, for my next question, we're going to use the annotation tools again. And this slide reminds you how to put them on if you need it. And we're going to use the pen tool. So it's the very top tool. You can use your arrow tool if you want to, but the reason I'm asking you to use the pen tool is so that the next question I ask you is anonymous. So it's up to you, it's your choice. But on your toolbar, try on the very left-hand side of your screen, clicking the pen tool. So what you're clicking on the screen is my screen grab. You need to look at the very left of your screen and click on the pen tool and try that. And you just need to do a blob, a squiggle, a little tick, something like that. And again, if you want to use chat, you can. If you want to use your arrow tools, you can. You can use a line tool, I don't mind. Gosh, should I be a psychologist and analyze this? Maybe I should ask Mark to kind of infer about the group from this. Maybe it's just conscious mess. And Roy said this is tagging gone mad. Yeah, okay, so this is a bit crazy, everybody, but we have just practiced. So let's just pause on the annotations, please. Let's just pause. We're going to go into our question now. So my question is, thinking back to pre-COVID, thinking back to 2019, and whatever work or types of learning you were involved in then, what I'd like you to do is think about your opinion of virtual facilitation before COVID. So please use that pen tool, do a tick, a squiggle, a circle, then just to let us know where were you at. So a lot of you were saying quite openly and honestly that you weren't interested, and that's absolutely fine. I can completely understand that. A few of you said, well, I tried it, wasn't really my bag. That's okay. And a lot of you were in the it's okay, like we knew about it, we tried it, but it wasn't as good as face-to-face. We didn't need to put the effort in. And a good number of you are saying you loved it, which is absolutely brilliant. And in chat, there's a couple of okays, and Ollie said, loved the idea, but nobody else here was ready. We hear that a lot, Ollie. We actually had quite a few clients that came to us in kind of Q1, Q2 of 2020 saying, hi, yeah, that conversation we started in 2017, 2018, 2019 about virtual, we'd like to do that now because we've got no choice. So you couldn't get the decent tech to use this, Catherine, and James said not much interest from delegates or the organisation. And Roy says, I work for the NHS and not being ready was very true for us. Okay. So there are all sorts of barriers and stuff involved in this. And it's interesting where we're all at with this. But it's interesting also our attitudes is a really important point. This is from CIPD report this year. It's just been released the last few months. And some of you are still sending me private messages. You need to set to everyone for everybody to see those. Now, we were forced to use live online and other digital options as well over the last year and a half, but will it actually stick? Will we continue with that? Now that lockdown restrictions are lifting, are we going to rush back to the physical classroom? How many people can safely be in that physical classroom together and still be cost effective? There's a lot to consider, let alone our own attitudes to this way of working. And this CIPD quote highlights what we know already, that if people aren't involved and on board with an idea, well, quite frankly, it's not going to work. And we are the ones that make this work. Now, Mark, we chatted a little bit about this when we were kind of did a run through earlier on this week. What are your thoughts on this point about the ownership of this way of working?
It's a really interesting just seeing some of the comments in the chat box as well about how other people have experienced this, either from the point of view of the organization or from particular teams, or maybe, if we're being honest, from our own sense of confidence and ownership around, you know, how are we even going to do this? There was so much chat around necessity, and actually just to put that being the factor that pushes people into this space of, we must do this and we'll have to get along with it and we'll just learn it as we go. And I think for a lot of people that we've spoken to, a lot of we support a lot of facilitators, coaches who are working in the learning and development industry, and that's really been a very key theme of going, right, we know we need to do this. There are so many different options, and I think that can be just overwhelming for people. And that sense of overwhelm is the thing that has held people back, I think. There's also a sense, I think, when you're into this sort of space, that the temptation is to throw everything at this and look at all the different bells and whistles and features, whereas I think something we've noticed is that actually stripping it back and looking at making things as simple as possible and really just working with the tools that you need for the situation rather than all the possible tools that are available has been a real success story in a lot of the people that we've spoken to and supported.
I love that, especially that last point, Mark. We're always saying to people, just like, yeah, there's loads of stuff out there. There's Mural, there's Menti, there's Padlet, there's Jamboard, and I can see there's some discussion going on about what features does WebEx have that Zoom doesn't have, and loads of stuff like that. And I always say the best platform is the one you have, even if you don't like it very much, even if it's got limitations. But you've got it, so work with it. And like you say, start simple. Don't overwhelm yourself. Goodness me, we've got enough to cope with in life, haven't we, Mark?
Absolutely. And there's so much. You could absolutely get lost in researching all of this. And I'm sure many of the people on the call will have found that you can just go down a rabbit hole into different technologies. It's in the phrase there, isn't it? There's so many different options. Stick with what you've got and then work from there upwards.
Fantastic, Mark. Thank you very much. So let's turn this over to absolutely everybody else at this point. You know, we had that question earlier on about how you were feeling about virtual classrooms or live online facilitation before COVID. And we know that a lot of you have done a lot of that work over the last year and a half. So how are we feeling about virtual facilitation now? And even if you still aren't doing that, you might have changed your mind over the last year and a half, one way or another. So let us know in chat, please. I can see there's some great conversation in chat about picking up systems and barriers due to digital poverty, and the digital skills as well is a big thing in there. So how are we feeling about virtual facilitation now? Do you want to continue, or are you desperate to get back to your physical classroom and leave this digital world behind, or something else? Let me know. James says, love it. Me too, James. Kevin says, working with community organisations, we found they all suddenly had Zoom thrown at them. So we started to use it. That thing of going with what our audience are comfortable with. Absolutely, Kevin. If I was with you right now, I'd give you a high five. Catherine says, I'm known as the Zoom guru in my organisation. Fantastic, Catherine. Well done. And James is adding, bye-bye classroom. James says, I love it, but I do miss face-to-face. And I think, you know, that's part of the bigger thing of missing people and physicality and so on. But it's all about the right tool for the job. And sometimes that will be the face-to-face classroom. What else have we got? Let me pick a few things out. Gail says you were able to achieve so much more in the same time scales. Really like that. That's interesting. We can deliver worldwide. We can adapt. We're adapting to it, but not enjoying it as much as I thought I would, says Hina. Hina, you're sending that to me privately. You need to send that publicly to everyone, please. Lots of talk about going towards a blended option, which is really important. It's not just about the virtual classroom. That's what I focus on. That's my speciality. But actually, it's about what should be in the physical classroom. What should be e-learning, what should be a massive open online course, and all of the other options that you've got. We've also got Kimberly saying, completely agree with going with what the audience want. We keep gathering feedback from our learners and go with the flow of what people want when we get back into the classroom properly. Victoria says, I do love it, but miss face-to-face. That's a bit of a theme that's coming through. Lindsay says, non-verbal communication is more difficult to pick up on virtually compared to face-to-face, but that could be my skills and confidence. So Lindsay, you're absolutely right. It is more difficult, and it's to do with skills and confidence. And I'll make a point about this a little bit later on, so I will come back to this. It's a mix of both, says Angeline. Reduced cost and travel and hotels is a win, but you have to manage the managers who still think virtual classroom means they can send emails and work through. Oh, that's a really challenging one. So I think the last point I want to pick out here from Roy says, as a trust, we've jumped forward 5 years in the space of one with digital technology, and a lot of organisations are saying that too. We're hearing that from a lot of places. So thank you very much for that. Now, if you have any questions that you want to pose specifically, you are more than welcome to use the Q&A panel. So there's a specific Q&A panel for asking questions, and there's the chat panel for general chit chat with each other. So make sure you've got the right panel open. Okay, so let's go and have a look at the second point, is that we are seeing more and more people comfortable, excuse me, with the basic technology of their platforms, Zoom, Teams, whatever it might be. But is that enough? Do we need to be more fluent with the technology that we are using? And I think that's a really big step change. We weathered the COVID-19 storm by getting live online really quickly. Now, at Lightbulb Moment, we had some clients whose training just had to continue for a variety of reasons. And they had days or maybe just hours to get to grips with doing that virtually. And there were varying degrees of success, and people forgave us, quite frankly, for any stumbles. Everyone understood it was trying times all round. However, a lot of people have only focused on the basics and haven't spent time looking at how to use the platforms and external tools to make their learning offerings better. Now, this is a balance. You know, Mark and I were just saying, keep simple, keep kind of streamlined. So it is a case of, you know, once you've got the basics and you're happy, then gradually expand what you're learning. Don't jump in at the deep end necessarily. That's not what we're saying. But once you have learnt these things, it is about developing that skill further and getting deeper into it. We're at the point now of needing to be more adaptable, more flexible, like these trees in the wind. They've got the strength, which I equate to our learning and development backgrounds and skills and everything we know about our topics and organizations and clients. But if you look at the tops of the trees, they're actually quite flexible in this awful wind that you can see here, and they've adapted to cope with the conditions they're in, which is where I see we need to develop our skills further. So I think this is a really important point that we can consider for ourselves. So let's share ideas in an insight, quite frankly, so that we can learn from each other. So in the chat, please, so make sure you've got that chat panel open. I would like you to just share, how are you making sure to advance your own technical skills? So we're not necessarily talking about the L&D stuff, but we're talking about how do we use the platform? Should we use Mural or Padlet or something like that? You know, how do we share in the best way possible? How do we make it less clunky and more smooth? So share some things in chat, please. How are you making sure to advance your own technical skills and that of the teams maybe you're in or that you manage? So how are you doing that? So if you haven't got the chat window open, you might just need to move your mouse on the screen of your computer, click on the chat panel at the bottom. So how are we doing this for ourselves? Joining webinars such as this? Absolutely, there's loads of webinars out there. Learning as I go, no real strategic plan. Often that's the case for everyone. Practice with colleagues and dry runs, loving it. Learning as we go along, that's a great way to do things. YouTube videos, testing out tools in different contexts, using templates available, that's a really good idea. YouTube tutorials, there's loads of stuff on YouTube. We've got our own YouTube channel as well. Trial and error, all good. Learning by failure is a great way. Attending training sessions, getting updates from various services, Googling things, using instructional videos, making use of our internal development and capability program. That's a really important point, getting the actual training as well. And there's a conversation going on about Miro and Murals, different external things as well. What else have we got? We've got screen sharing and breakout rooms to engage everyone on courses and confirm understanding of content. Really important, that interaction. Test. Love that point, Hina, or Hina. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing your name right. Winging it, says Laura. Yeah, there's a certain amount of winging it. There's, you know, the reality is we've only got so much time. So there's going to be a bit of winging it as well. There are lots of guides and help online, learning from others. The organization's IT support on a one-on-one, which is really useful, especially if you're less technically comfortable. Practice. Yes, Andrea, absolutely. And I include myself in that. I've been doing this since 2013 and it's still trial and error. It's still practice. It's still dry runs. It's still test. It just kind of continues and you develop those skills. And some of you are saying, well, I'm not doing that well. There's too busy doing other things. And that's completely understandable. But there comes a point where we have to make those decisions of, do I pick this up and focus on it? Do I drop something else? Or the other way around, do I drop this? How does that work for me, my team, my organization, rather than kind of getting stressed about all of it? Okay, so this is looking like you've got a lot of different things that you are looking at here. We've got some stuff we're going to share at the end with all sorts of resources from us as well. Now, Mark, I wanted to kind of get you involved in this a little bit more so that you can tell us a bit about this, please. The types of work wheel. How is this relevant to advancing our skills?
Thank you, Joe. I just wanted to say how much I'm loving all of these comments. I think I love the honesty as well. Like Laura and Andy, really just talking about winging it. That is a very genuine and acceptable approach to getting to grips and becoming proficient and technically savvy rather than just surviving and being sufficient. I really like that honesty. So for those of you who are joining who are TMS accredited, you will recognize this model. This is for those of you who aren't. In short, this is the result of some of our research into high-performing teams. We look at consolidating, just seeing is there a range of activities and high-level tasks that high-performing teams get involved with. This is a really flexible little model. We use it for all sorts, not just high-performing teams, but for project management, for talking about change, and you can apply it thinking about yourself as well, thinking about the type of learning that you might need to do. So we talked earlier on about getting lost in the research piece, and that might be involved with advising there in the west of the wheel. You might then move into an innovating space and think about, well, how might I do this differently? Again, that can be a trap that people can fall into, doing so much of this that you just get lost in making something really complex that actually could be relatively simple. There's also a piece around promoting, which is about selling an idea and really getting people on board with a new way of doing things. All of those comments about testing and experimenting, we'd have that in the orange with developing. And then at some point, that we have to get to the stage where we're organizing things as well. So we're actually putting systems and processes in place that make things work and that make things efficient and consistent. And of course, we have Mike here on the line, who's Joe's producer, who's actually making sure that the whole experience is consistent and efficient and repackageable, so that, you know, somebody attending this webinar in France is getting the same experience as much as we can to somebody attending the webinar in the UK. And then inspecting is a critical activity where we look at checking and auditing the work that we do. So how are we going to measure that we are technically savvy as opposed to just sufficient? And then, of course, there's the maintaining piece in terms of looking after the value side of things and protecting our own well-being, that we are not, you know, the only person who's making all of these leaps, that actually we're being supported in that learning work that we do. So this is a really nice, simple model that allows us to think about the balance of how we apply our learning to something like becoming technically savvy in a virtual space.
That's brilliant, Mark. Thank you very much indeed. And I think the way you've applied that to all the different parts of this work wheel is really important and brings me on to my next point, which is about, you know, we had that exposure and upskilling during the last year and a half. And we know that doing something really helps us to retain knowledge. A lot of you have said that in that chat window of, you know, just winging it, getting on with it, Googling it in practice. And we certainly have had a lot of that with live online delivery recently as a generalization. And I think this is really important. Now, this is a common saying in chat. What's the missing word here? What's the last word of this saying? Practice makes what? What's the word that's missing here in chat? Oh, loving this. Yeah, practice makes perfect. I like better. That's a good one. Less wrong. Practice makes learning. Lots of different options there. But the saying that most people know is practice makes perfect. You're absolutely right. That's the saying. But I disagree. And I can see some of you disagree as well. I think that practice makes permanent. How many times have you seen an ingrained action that just isn't right? And you're absolutely right, Corinne. Practice only makes perfect if you learn it right. That's the whole point about learning it right in the first place. If you just repeat something that you've practiced and it becomes permanent, it's not always right. Do you have any examples of that you can share in chat? Now, this is closely related to things like habit. So I bought a new to me car a few years ago, and it has a button to start it rather than traditionally putting your key in and turning the ignition. Now, I've had that car for about 4 years now. And sometimes when I pull up on my driveway, I still put my hand down to take the keys out of the ignition that aren't there. That's my practice makes permanent. I've done it so many times over the years. That's the kind of thing that we need to be thinking about with our skills development. And a lot of you said that's why you were here at the beginning. Somebody said, well, I've been doing loads of this, but I'm self-taught. What do I need to know? It's obvious when I say it. If we aren't skilled at something, we aren't going to do it well or even want to do it. And Catherine, I love that example. I still type my old password into my laptop. It's so ingrained. How annoying is that? Now, this is fine if we don't want to do something, if we don't enjoy running, but instead we do a dancing class, we go to Zumba or something. But when we look at workplace learning, we can't have that attitude anymore if we want to be impactful in our work and still be in this industry and supporting the people in our organizations. An essential element to move forward is ensuring that you or your staff know how to design and facilitate for live online learning and in the platform that you use. And the bigger picture of this is investing in and focusing on learning culture and communication with stakeholders in the business or the organization about changing needs. It's all part of this together. Now, when we look at the next point, our fourth point in this list of 5 changes that we've noticed, going back to 2018, 2019, in our virtual classroom training courses at Lightbulb Moment, it was very rare that our attendees would be comfortable on webcam. The majority of sessions we ran, I might use the webcam at the introduction, maybe at the end for questions and answers, and that's it. All the while delivering content, having discussions, doing activities without seeing the people that I was training. But that was normal for me. But 2020 changed all of that. And I'm sure you've experienced that change too. This is a report from Webinar Company On24, just released this month in May 21. And they share that video use in webinars has gone up 26% year on year. That's a massive change in a very short amount of time. And for a lot of trainers and attendees alike, it's a really great thing that we're using our webcams and video more. So in chat, please, what are the benefits of webcams being on in training sessions? What are the benefits? So today we're in a webinar. There's what, nearly 200 of you or something, 150 of you. But what about a training session? So you might have 8, 10, 20 people, maybe up to 50. What are the benefits of having webcams on? You can see expressions and make human connections. Thank you, James. Laura says you can view engagement levels. Yes. Okay, I love this one. You can see people's cats. Brilliant. So other comments, it makes it personable. I'm not talking to myself. We know they're awake. We can read the room. We can see people laughing at our jokes. Oh, Catherine, I do like that. It does give you a little bit more confidence when you're doing that rather than hoping people are laughing at your jokes. You can engage participants and sense their engagement. You can see their expression. It feels better. You can react to their body language and their facial expressions. It's friendlier, says David. I like that. Thank you. You can actually see people are there and listening rather than they've gone off to make your lunch. You can see their reactions. Have they understood something? You can feel the connection. And Remy put feel in inverted commas, but you're absolutely right. You can still feel it. You can get visible feedback. It helps with connecting, at checking understanding. You can see when somebody wants to talk but is struggling to cut into the conversation, so then you can deliberately bring them in. That's a really nice point there, Kevin. Thank you very much. You can follow communication and non-verbal communication a little bit easier, put a name to their face, maybe meet their kids, feel less like you're talking to yourself in your back bedroom. That's a good one, Oliver. Very nice. And Abigail says, I feel like a medium without cameras. Like, is anyone out there? So there's lots of different things that we can appreciate about having our webcams on. And Julie gets ideas for redecorating. Fantastic. And it's great to see people, to read their facial expressions and see where they are and all those other things that you just said. And Zoom research shows that people trust more and are more engaged when webcams are on. And it's not surprising, as we get so much rich information from seeing people and feeling more like we are with them. However, there's always a downside, and that we're seeing lots of trainers and organisations rely on webcams to overcome that distance and what they perceive as the barrier of technology. That whole thing of, I can't see them, are they really there? This research from PowerPoint design agency Buffalo 7 showed that a huge amount of people, 73% of people, had had video call anxiety during the kind of COVID pandemic. And in the links at the end, I think Mike's just shared it there as well. We've got some more research to show that videos and webcams aren't always that engaging. And Faye, you've sent that message to me privately. You need to send it to everyone, but bandwidth is a challenge with webcams on. And Lindsay says, I'm not sure if I found non-verbal cues easy to read with the camera on, but it allows me to feel like I'm attending and supporting the session. Interesting. And Robert's sharing a stat as well, saying that 70% of people fear public speaking, and that doesn't mean they should avoid it. There's a good point, Robert. Sometimes it's about dealing with it. But if we don't know people have anxiety, we can't deal with it, and we can be a bit more bullish and assume everyone should just put their webcam on and it's normal, when for a lot of people that's not going to be the case. It's about how we deal with it, knowing that kind of element of things. And I think what we need to have a look at, as we've said, bandwidth can be an issue. There can be personal issues that mean webcam use isn't preferred, and we need to respect the reasons for that. And far more important for us, I think, than webcam is to focus on using interactions, discussions and activities to develop that feedback loop with your learners in a whole new way. So let's think about this, and again, add your ideas in chat, please. What can you do to see people instead of relying just on webcams? How can we involve them, get that feedback, know they're there, know they've learned something, know they've got it? How can we do that instead of webcams? And a lot of you in chat are just sharing some really great stuff about webcams and not liking it. And that's the stuff we've got to kind of be aware of and challenge ourselves to work in different ways. So what have we got? What can we do instead of just webcams? Ask open questions, use chat, icebreakers, polls, quizzes, hands up emojis, questions, use names and ask questions, thumbs up and emojis, the whiteboard, the Q&A section. We do have Q&A today. If you have specific questions, we'll come to that at the end. Ask questions to generate responses. Basically, it's all about getting people involved, getting them to think, to do, and to give you information. And there's a lot more stuff coming through here. Excuse me a second whilst I cough. So you've got some absolutely great points here and some good ideas if you've not seen some of these things before, and maybe some external tools like Slido and stuff like that can be going and useful to look at. This is about doing more interactions, more activities with the platform you have, WebEx, Zoom, whatever it might be, and those external tools, Mentimeter, Padlet, Mural, Miro, there are loads of them. But as we said earlier on, you don't have to go out and spend lots of time. If you don't have it, stick with what's simple. You can use all sorts of feedback icons, emoticons. If you're using Teams, there's GIFs and memes and stuff like that, which are great fun as well. And this is about getting really quick feedback from people, where normally you might expect, for example, a nod in a physical setting. You can ask a question which generates some kind of response with maybe a green tick or check mark or emoticon. Chat, you've all said, is an amazing tool to use. What is it that people are typing in? Who types long or short messages? What does that mean about your attendees? Now, even in a webinar with loads of you, I've noticed some people are typing more things in. Some people are typing from a particular angle. There's one person who's always the quickest to type something in on a question. So you can notice that about smaller amounts of people as well. Who volunteers to speak, who does activities, all sorts of things that you can do virtually are versions of what you see when you are physically together. And it makes it so that you're really aware of the people with you, even if you can't see them. And then if you do have webcams, well, you know what, that's a huge bonus and that's amazing, but we're not relying on them. Now, all of this is called digital body language. It's something we need to know more about in order to facilitate live online learning really well. And we've got more information in this at the end of the webinar. We've got a blog with all of the details from today, all of the links that Michael's been sharing as well. We've got in one blog post we'll share at the end. And to my last key point, this key change in the world of virtual facilitation, it's great to have and use your skills and experience from physical training, but live online is a different modality than face-to-face. When we try to exactly replicate a physical classroom, we miss out on the thinking that encourages creativity and adapting our sessions to make the most of this way of being together. Amanda says in chat, some of our staff have no access to cameras, so it does become challenging. And that's why those other activities and interactions, Amanda, are really important, because you can still see people. It's a different way of seeing people. Now, this graph from, come on slides, there we go. This graph from Digital Promise in the USA is looking at students' experience of their university courses before and after the change to live online learning. At the top of the graph, there were things that were better or the same experience when delivering virtually, which is absolutely great. But towards the bottom, there are more things that students experience as being worse online, such as it was worse, they weren't feeling included, they found it a struggle to keep interested in the content, and opportunities to collaborate. And this highlights areas in design and facilitation to focus development on. When these events are poorly designed and poorly delivered, they have a detrimental effect not only on people's learning and, quite frankly, on your reputation or the one of the organisation or the team or the department, but actually it can have an impact on the person's performance, motivation, and in some cases their mental health. We recorded a podcast unpicking some of the detail of a live online event that had just this kind of awful impact. And I think it makes a really important listen to any learning designer, as well as specifically to virtual. Now, I noticed something here that Lydia said, I can relate to interaction fatigue. So maybe there was some other comment that I haven't seen. And I think this is a really important point that, you know, if we're just doing things for the sake of doing it, so I'm not talking about it today, but you might have seen somewhere on a blog or in a book, the 3 to 5 minute rule, which is about having an interaction every 3 to 5 minutes. But if you're doing it for the sake of doing it and it doesn't bring people together, it doesn't help with human connection, it's not about collaboration or the learning, then you'll definitely get that interaction fatigue. So it's about doing it the right way and making it meaningful. So that's a really important point, not doing it just for the sake of it. Now, this Redback report highlights that we need enthusiastic presenters. Your personality needs to overcome the technology that some people perceive as that barrier. And what's interesting here is that seeing someone on a webcam, according to this report, isn't the be all and end all of a live event. They're saying here, what makes an online event great? 3% are saying being able to see people on webcam. So it's not all about that from both sides of that point of view. So in chat, please, what are you taking away from this bit of research? It's one diagram from a whole report, But what are you seeing here? What are you taking away? Or what are you questioning? So in chat, please, what are you taking away? What are you seeing? What are you questioning? I'm just looking back at some of the other bits in chat as well. Patrick made a great point earlier on about chatting can be disturbingly force people to switch focus. It's not as easy for people who are not fluent in writing in the language of the seminar. That's a really good point, Patrick. And that goes to knowing your audience. There's a whole section of that that's really important. So what are we seeing here? What are we learning? What are we taking away? We are looking at things like the facilitator still has a massive role to play. Absolutely. As a presenter, I should turn off my webcam quite often. That can be the case. It can be less distracting for people. People don't care about seeing the presenter, are likely doing the email anyhow, says Robert. Interesting take. Content is less important than the experience. That's interesting. Only 17% for content delivery. I think the 17%, the way I'm reading that one is the content is delivered as promised. So if the webinar said we're going to cover 3 things about this, they cover 3 things about that. It's not the quality of the content delivery. That's how I'm reading it. All sorts of different things: enthusiastic, facilitator, how we make people feel. I feel inspired to try more. I love that. That's brilliant. Surprised at the 3%. I thought that was really important. Breeder, that's a really interesting point. I think it's important for connection, but we don't need to see someone the whole time necessarily. And Kevin says it is challenging having my camera on. I agree. I've got mine off right now and I'm used to doing it. Hina says it's so hard to be enthusiastic when you can't see people. You are seeing people by the chat box. Hina, I can't see you. I don't know where you are. I don't know what's going on for you, but I know you've been typing in chat. I know you're a real person. So I know you're engaged, as you say, by what you're saying and the fact that you're saying it. So all really important things that you've got here. Shahbaz says willing to explore the digital body language concept. Brilliant. And we've got more on that in the blog that we'll share later on. And a last point here before I move on, Lindsay says, is there a concern about presenter burnout? Interesting point, Lindsay. This comes to how long should your sessions be? How do you structure it? Do you have somebody you work with? So I've got Michael and Mark with me today. And Mark said beforehand, you know, if you get to a point where you need me, just throw it over to me and I can cover for you. So I know I've got Mark to rely on. Michael normally would do that. He's got a bit of a cold today, so he doesn't want to come on audio. But it's having those people around you. And you know what? Doing an hour at this level of enthusiasm and passion and delivery, I'm about good with that, quite frankly. So you have to be careful, you have to design it well, and you have to manage it well. So my very last point today is that we can do all of this with great planning, design, practice, and people. So it was a great question you asked just then. Now, this is a facilitator guide template you can download and adapt to make it right for you. You may have seen it before if you follow me on Twitter or whatever. I share it a lot. It's got some great feedback. When you read the blog that goes with this, you'll see why I've designed it the way I have. It's partly about helping to ensure an appropriate variety of interactions, going back to that interaction fatigue point, and helping to ensure that you've got these at the right time intervals as well, which is really important. It's not just about that interaction every few minutes for the sake of it. It's digging into why do we do it? What is the best tool to use? And James, you are more than welcome to borrow it. Mike will share the link in chat, and you can go and download the template and use it as you wish. But let us know how you get on. Comment on the blog and tell us what you change about it if you do. This is all about helping you with your design and supporting your delivery, and you can read more about this on the blog. In summary, we should be taking advantage of what live online delivery can offer us. which is actually to break apart our delivery, give space between sessions so that people can still focus on their work and deadlines, as well as have time to put things into practice in reality, in everyday work. And it allows you as a designer and facilitator to focus much more on the learner, as you aren't having to do or be asked to add in more and more content to justify people being out of the office or the cost of travel, accommodation, and so on. That's everything I wanted to cover today. Gosh, we've whistled through that very, very quickly. You've been absolutely amazing in chat, sharing lots of stuff. We are going to go to questions in a second, but I just want to say we offer training to teams of people so that you can design and deliver really great webinars and virtual classrooms. You've got our details there. Mike will share more in chat. But Mark, let's go to some questions and see what kind of things we need to talk about now.
Great idea, Joe. Thank you. And I'll let you take a breather because, oh my gosh, how much energy have you been investing in today's session? There's some comments there in the chat just talking about how much you yourself are kind of delivering, and it does take an awful lot to keep up this level of energy and enthusiasm, regardless of how much caffeine you've had. So I think that point about burnout that Lindsay made is really, really important one. Now, for those of you, if you do have any questions and comments, there is a Q&A panel. Feel free to pop those into there. If you have any open kind of chats, comments, reflections, concerns, feel free to include that in the chat as well as we go on. While we're waiting for any other questions to come in that you might have for Joe, I just wanted to comment on that point about presenter burnout and a little practical tip that I found most recently on the video front. I think we've been running kind of webinars for all kinds of things for about 10 or so years, and we've only just started using video more readily and more kind of regularly in the last 2 years or so. And one of the things is that I found is that there's too many channels. Like if you're running a session and you want people to look at you, great, you've got a webcam. If you want them to look at a screen with some interesting slide content and charts and graphs, people have got to make a choice. Likewise, you as the presenter, you've got this kind of interesting conundrum of what do you look at? You might have some slides and notes. You might have other people who's got their video content on there, and you've also got your own video screen to think about. Oh, how am I looking? You know, what's my background looking like? Is my house really messy? How's my appearance today? And it's just too much. We're not designed to manage all of these different channels. So one really quick tip, and this is really easy to do in Zoom for people who use Zoom, is to keep webcams on, but switch your feed off so that you can't see your own feed. That makes it much more like you're in a room with people. So otherwise, you know, the kind of physical equivalent would be you're in a room with people and you constantly got a mirror pointing at your face. And the temptation will be to constantly check and make sure that you're sitting upright or you're looking enthusiastic enough. So I definitely would recommend that as a tip.
Thank you. Yeah, I turned off my self view in a meeting the other day, and then I turned it on for some reason. I realized I was slouching. It's just like, oh, well, that's not a good look. Okay, straight back. So thank you very much, Mark, for your kind comments and all the kind comments in chat as well. I've noticed a few questions here that we'll go through in our last few minutes. Just to pull out a question, or not a question, but a comment from Julie saying, great session, really interesting to not see you and yet see you so well. It sparked real reflection for me. And this is about that human connection part that we really can get even on a huge webinar, let alone with less people in a training session. Thank you. So in the question panel, Hina says, do you guys have stats or trends to support digital learning, especially in comparison to face-to-face? Hina, Michael has shared with you, I think, the research and notes from today. That's got some research in it. It's also got links to some of our other blogs that have got research bits in it and stats and numbers. So definitely go and have a look at that. And Michael will share that again for you if you don't have that handy. Serena says, how do you manage cultural differences and also the language possible barriers? A really big question. It comes under the heading of know your audience, as does accessibility. I noticed a point about lip reading and so on. All of this is about knowing your audience ahead of time. Being aware of what those cultural differences are. For example, I've worked a lot with the Egyptian culture or the Middle East, and there's a much more kind of hierarchical feeling where teachers are kind of more on a pedestal and you don't argue, you don't what's the word I'm looking for, contrast or contradict the teacher. So, you know, you can't schedule or design your session that way. So you've got to work in different ways, knowing a bit more about your audience. Any advice on dealing with tumbleweed moments when you put an open question and get no response? Lisa, it's all about starting out right in the first place. If you go to lightbulbmoment.info, on that first homepage, there's a session structure blog, and it's about explaining the tools at the beginning, starting off easy, building up, and so on. And then you probably won't get those tumbleweed moments. How do you manage the different level of people on a particular topic? That's a general training question. That's not specific to virtual, although in virtual you can have extra materials more easily for people. You can put them in breakout rooms perhaps more easily, but that's a more general training thing, less virtual, I think. And I think we've got more questions there I haven't answered. I'm sorry about that. If you go to lightbulbmoment.community and ask those questions again, we will be sure to answer them. But I think I need to hand over to you, Mark, because we are very definitely at time.
We are, and I'm glad you mentioned the community piece, because I know that's a relatively new area that you and Mike are working on at the moment. That means that everyone can go and find out loads more about what you do and what you can offer them. So definitely would recommend everybody to do that after we finish in today's session. From a TMSDI point of view, for those of you who are accredited, fantastic. We've got all kinds of other accreditation options coming up over the summer. You can find all of those on our website, tmsdi.com. If you're not accredited in any of our tools, you'll find a discovery webinar that we're hosting on the 10th of June. You can come and learn over 45 minutes all about what we do, how we can add value to your approach if you're in the facilitation world, coaching world, or learning and development world. All that remains is really for me to say a huge thank you to you, Joe, for all of these amazing insights, research, and top tips that you've been sharing in today's session, and to you all for joining. Just enjoy the rest of your week, and do let us know via Twitter. You'll find our Twitter handle at the top there on what you are taking away from today's session. It will be great to hear from you.
And thank you, Mark, for inviting me, and everyone's been absolutely fabulous. Bye bye, everyone.